Hey guys, this is JJ and welcome to the training review for the week of 27th of July. And so this week what's happening with me is I am doing a deload week. So I decided that instead of just talking about my main lifts themselves, I'm also going to be talking about some of the accessory exercises that I will be doing and giving you guys a breakdown of what I'm doing them for and the purpose and the focus of each of these exercises. So I started off my deload week with squats with 142.5 kilos for a set of 4, and I think I was doing 4 sets of 4 on the day, and after 2 sets I was like, okay, let's just finish the sets. So instead of just doing a set of 4, I just did 2 of my sets together at one go as a set of 8, which came up to about an RP of 7. So overall it wasn't super taxing as well, so I thought I might as well just finish it. So I don't encourage doing this on your deloads, but I know that if I am going to do it, I know it's something that I can definitely complete easily. But still, like I said, I don't encourage it. But this is me trying to have some fun after a really hard push block. Generally all smiles on the day, and we are moving on to bench press. So for bench press, what I was doing today was actually trying to get some practice on the ER rack. And why I need practice on it is because it's a deload week and I've been benching on the fatter Eleiko pad, and I realized that I'm not able to do some things the same, and one of the big focuses for me was actually I'm trying to keep my butt down as well as maintaining the same amount of arch. So one thing I realized with benching on the ER rack is that there's a lot of total body movement as the bar is coming down. So you can see how my hips and my knees are sort of shifting all over the place, and my neck is also slightly coming off the bench as well. So these are things that I want to work on. And I took this information to develop my prep for day 2. So what you're seeing me do here is actually a really classic sort of one of the drills that I used to use in the past to help me to build my thoracic extension, which is basically I just hold the weight in my hand and then just lean over a barbell and try to work different areas of my spine that feel sort of restricted. Additionally, another cue that I focus on while doing this is actually to breathe into the front of the chest and lift the sternum up. So you can see how it sort of translates over to the bench press as well. So as you are arching and you are breathing, you want to lift the front of the sternum up. So day 2 is my primary deadlift day for the deload, and what I'm doing here is a 177.5 kilos for I think a triple. I think generally it moved pretty well, and I'm actually pretty happy with this set of deadlifts. Yes, I was a bit fatigued and you can see a bit of hip shoot, the hip shooting up as I start to pull. But I say generally it's actually very positive, because honestly I never thought that I would be doing, I would be repping sort of 3 plates for deadlifts, especially on a deload as well. And I think this is one of the things to really consider, because if you just put in the work and you just add like a little bit each block, you're actually gonna put quite a bit on your lifts that you might think are struggling in the long term. So I always look at my deload blocks and like the weights that I'm doing as a way to sort of give me perspective on how far I've come. And I think in the long run, your small wins will always just build up to that bigger total in the end. So find a way to win in your training no matter what. So moving on to some accessory work, I started off doing some hook lying dumbbell bench presses. And why I like this exercise is basically because I bench with a lot of arch and a very big arch. So what it does is actually allow me to work the pecs through a full range of motion. And don't be worried that I'm not actually sort of retracting and depressing here. And don't be worried that your shoulders will actually get injured or anything. If you're actually retracting your rib cage, what is going to happen is you're going to have that stability from your rib cage pressing hard against your scap and allowing sort of your pecs and your triceps to move through a full range of motion rather than retracting and depressing. So here I'm doing some seated lateral raises, and I want to highlight the way that I've set up this exercise is I've set up my hips at an angle where I can feel a lot of hamstrings as well as my head on a pad, so that I'm not using actually any sort of accessory breathing muscles to sort of shrug the weight up. So my neck is relaxed, and so is my core is engaged passively through the range of motion. So same thing for the kettlebell leg extensions here as well. I want to keep my core stable and my neck sort of like relaxed, even though you can see that I'm not really doing that so well here. But I really think that this is a really good exercise in terms of not just building quads, but actually if you have a internal rotation deficit at the hips, this is one of the exercises that can drive a bit of that through moving the tibia on the femur instead of just usually moving the femur on the acetabulum, which is your hip joint. So aside from getting big quads, you're also doing sort of mobility work, and yeah, these feel really kind of mixed for me because it's my first time doing that. But eventually I think at the end of this block I would like to progress them to maybe, this is 12 kilos, so I would like to progress them to maybe 20 or 24 kilos by the end of it. The next exercise that I'm doing here is called a sumo good morning, and what I'm actually doing this for is just a bit of adductor health. So my adductors tend to get quite beat up, so in terms of in a sumo position, your adductors are actually really eccentrically oriented or sort of long, if you like to put it that way. And this just trains the adductor or moves the adductor through that range of motion and trains it through that position with some load. So over time I would like to put some weight on the bar and actually push this exercise a little bit. So one thing I would like to say about the sumo good mornings is that I personally am a very flexion based or flexion biased individual, which means that I tend to go into flexion more than I go into extension when the weights get heavy. So I would like to practice a bit more extension actually, which is contrary to what a lot of people, or the more trendy stuff that is actually sort of looking to get people out of extension. So how I do this is actually by putting a weight on my back, as opposed to more extension based individual will need a weight on the front. So moving on to the next exercise, I call this a left ZOA lat pull down, and what I'm actually looking to accomplish here is actually, if you see I'm actually changing legs, I realized that okay, I've set it up wrongly, so I switched my legs back over. But what I'm trying to do is actually open up the right chest wall and close down the left chest wall. So you can see that how I'm doing this is actually, if you flex the front hip, you'll actually bring the front of the hip closer to the front of the rib cage on the left side, which closes down the left side and leverages the obliques on that side more. And whilst you're doing this, it actually helps you to train your positional integrity whilst you're performing exercises. And what this allows you to do is actually get that shoulder through a better range and the lat through a fuller range of motion. So moving on to day 3. Day 3 is actually the day where my squats are heavier, and the reason for doing this is because if you look at week 3 of my last training, which was my harder week, I actually dropped a bit of volume for day 3 and 4. And so my deload has typically already started after my day 2 of my week 3. So what we're trying to do is actually, since it's been a week since I've squatted heavy, we're trying to ramp up the intensity back up so that on Monday, my training, I'll be able to hit heavier weights without it feeling so foreign. So climbing back onto the ER rack for day 3 bench press as well. So the same thing as day 1. Focusing on getting that good position, and what you can see is actually I did a self unrack on 112.5 kilos because I was just wanting to get it done basically. So day 4 kind of brought a new variation into my training for the bench press, which is the Larsen press, or the Larsen touch and go bench press. And what we're seeing here is actually the new rogue fat pad replacing the old ER bench. So much for training and getting used to a flatter bench. But anyways, moving on to the touch and go bench press, I was meant to hit a 7 at RP 7. So I took 100 kilos for my first set of 7 and it actually wasn't a 7. So I decided to go up, and obviously what you'll see is I actually overestimated myself and went for 110 kilos, which I only got 4 at 7. And so I just hit a point where I realized that okay, I'm at 7 and there's really no point to push it anymore, so I just racked it. So I went back down to 100 kilos and did my sets of 7. And the reason for doing this variation is because I'm actually very dependent on my leg drive to maintain my thoracic extension as well as my arch. So doing these exercises actually forces me to create a bit more stability through my upper body rather than just relying on my legs. So we move on to deadlifts for day 4, which is 165 kilos for triples, and they're all done paused. So the main focus of doing paused deadlifts for me here is actually practicing the wedge and learning to break the floor, right? So I'm not actually pulling and stopping, I'm actually trying to just wedge, and then the floor breaks off the ground, stop, and then finish the pull. So again, day 4, I did some accessories, and what we're seeing here is a straight leg deadlift. So generally speaking, I'm not very good at hinging exercises, so what I'm trying to do with the straight leg deadlift is just to get a bit more of a pure hinge exercise, as well as to just try and train that movement pattern of the hinge, which I don't really get doing sumo. So I really like straight leg deadlifts as an exercise, and I'm just looking to push this as heavy as I can before I start to go into another push block again and have to dial these back. So the next exercise moving forward is the rear foot elevated split squat, or the Bulgarian split squats. And the reason I'm doing this is because like I said, I'm a person who tends to be a bit more flexion biased, and what happens when that happens is my pelvis tends to tuck under. And what the rear foot elevated split squat does, as opposed to a front foot elevated split squat, is actually, to get a bit more technical, it kind of keeps your pelvis a little bit more nutated, which means that you are a bit more extended, as opposed to a front foot elevated split squat, which gets your pelvis a bit more counter nutated, so it's a bit more tucked and underneath you. So I think the main difference to separate these two exercises is basically a rear foot elevated split squat, which would be a bit more hingy, and the front foot elevated split squat would be a bit more squatty. So generally I don't have a problem with squats, but I have a problem with hinges. So this is an exercise I would like to try to sort of help me gain a bit more external rotation and mobility in that position. So to finish off the week, I was doing some sort of vertical pulling, and I was a bit lazy to set up the lat pull downs like I did in day 2. So what I did was actually got a pad and then kind of got into this position, which is a rock back breathing position. And what this position is really good for is to help you sort of loosen up the muscles on the backside of your body through being in a bit more passive position. As well as, for me, based on my limitations, it helps me to expand my chest and my back a bit more, whilst allowing me to continue to work through the lat pull down and get me some vertical pulling for those lat gains. So this is what I mean by using your exercise and your positions to sort of give yourself back that mobility. And for me, my overhead mobility is really poor, so this is one of the exercises that I do. So that's it for this week, guys. If you like this kind of stuff, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.